Grüß, willkommen in einem meiner Aufregens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 19 of my figure gaming video series. In this video I'll be covering creating simple area terrain with a focus on the actual hardware working of creating the terrain. Just to reiterate, in this video I'm primarily focusing on creating reasonably good looking area terrain which is optimized for play. If you want to create diorama, this video series is not going to be for you. This video will cover the basic area terrain creation and playing area creation activities that you need to consider. This is the third version of the video, and since I created version 1, my view on optimal playing areas have changed dramatically. The main changes are a simpler playing area structure and simpler terrain placement guidelines, rather than my overly complex ideas on this particular topic. This has been the result of a large number of games, which has uncovered all sorts of issues with my earlier ideas. The other main change is the scale of gaming that I'm undertaking has changed from, if we go for Napoleonics, down to just commanding a corps, right up to commanding the entire army. And that requires some adjustments in terms of the way or the type of area terrain pieces I require. All my area terrain is based on 3mm thick MDF sheets which have been cut to the correct size and shape, and with the edges smoothed down so it looks more seamless on a playing area, as you can see here. Shown here is an example of a 9cm square and a 12cm square area terrain pieces, freshly cut with the corners rounded but with the edges not yet rounded down. These could be used for both woods, hills or built up areas, but in this video I'll mainly focus on a general overview of any area terrain piece. All of my area terrain pieces use a basic building block approach made from 3mm thick MDF board. The sizes of these basic building blocks depend on the element width. If the base widths that I'm using for the figures are 3cm, then I'll cut out a 4cm square and a 7cm square and a number of 7x4 and 10x4cm rectangles. The size is used for my 6mm World War II and Cold War force mixers, as well as 6mm Napoleonics and ancient force mixings. The overwhelming number of area terrain pieces I use is the 7cm by 4cm rectangle. This was not my initial intention or thoughts, but after playing dozens of games, I found it was more useful and looks a lot better. The 7cm square area terrain pieces are rarely used these days, as it actually, strangely enough, does not look good on my playing area. If my base width that I'm using is 4cm, then these are the sizes of area terrain I use. This size is commonly used for 15mm Napoleonic and ancient force mixers. It's also used, strangely enough, for my 10mm World War II force mixers as well. The 9cm square area terrain pieces is rarely used, and players can easily not bother creating that for the same reason as before. It actually doesn't look that good. The final sizes that I use is a 5cm wide base, because I sometimes use movement trays and it's 5. I'm going to skip that. But the other is 6cm wide bases, and the sizes are shown here. This is commonly used for big battle rules with 6mm and 15mm figure, as well as 25mm figures. I mean, a good example of the rules that would require this is Bitchute. I do have a playing area flank woods, which closes off a flank. These are typically 30cm long and up to 12cm deep. I create enough to cover a flank and then join together. In this case I round off the edges to make it look like a valley edge. I also do this with hills. I rarely use these terrain features, and personally I would give them a miss unless your rules specifically require something like this. Once we've cut out the MDF in the size that you so desire, I now round off the corner of each of these terrain pieces. Normally a little bit more than shown here, but not much more. Once I round it, then I use a drill with a sanding bit on the edge to create a slope on all the edges, so it can sit on a playing area almost seamlessly. While I never create more than one level of hills these days, if you want to create a 2-level hill, then I glue the top level to the base level, and so on. I spent a lot of effort in creating 2- and 3-level hills, and basically never use them. Once again, unless your rules require terrain like this, I'd give it a miss. After a significant amount of experimentation with lots of different colours, I now use a dark green spray paint and then flock the terrain pieces with woodland green flock, mainly the turf, fine turf. Even though I cover woods with a special type of flock later, I originally found it looks better if I flock the base as the same colour as the playing area, if I'm going to flock it. These days I don't bother flocking the wood area terrain pieces. The foliage covers the area terrain well enough. But some woods, maybe like open woods, may show the base. You're going to have to flock that. When flocking the area terrain, I use two basic colours, either woodland, both of which are woodland base fine turf. For 6mm and 3mm, you need very fine flock, and I find this works with 15mm as well. Most of the terrain I've shown previously were designed for Ancients and Napoleonics, which use 15mm figure. This can use less fine flock, but these days I've standardised on woodland fine turf for everything. For the woods, I cover the area terrain with woodland underbrush, as I indicated in my previous video. Coarse turf is probably okay as well, and I'll try that as well if you want a different effect for woods. There are a number of colours, and I basically like three types, open, and I have these colours I use to depict three types of woods, open, standard and closed. However, in practice I find I only ever use one type, standard woods, for most of my games. Once I've completed the area terrain piece, that is, I've made my MDF area terrain piece, I've sprayed paint green on it, I've applied glue to it and then put the two shades of woodland fine turf, I let it dry, then I spray it with a watered down solution of PVA and then wait for it to dry again. This ensures all the flock remains on the area terrain piece and does not fall off like a bad case of dandruff. After doing this, you can safely take this into a home without worrying about leaving lots of flock behind. Once the area terrain piece is dry and complete, I then glue a piece of dark green flock to the bottom so it'll grip to my terrain. You can just see the edges of the felt on this area terrain hill. I sometimes use different colours to depict woods and hills, and I definitely use a different colour for built-up areas. My original terrain did not look very good at all, as you can see here. It was cheap and easy to create, which is basically its main selling point, but looks awful. I've been inspired to create higher quality playing area and terrain due to a gamer sending me a photo of his newly created playing area, and I was impressed with it. In order to go down that path, I had to change a number of my earlier views, which is depicted in this video. Originally, I was really fixated on having a lightly coloured playing area, and there's some reasons for it, but there's a serious lack of light-coloured, high-quality flock. So my terrain has moved back to my original terrain, which uses a dark green fine turf. I've returned to my starting place, but with some minor but significant changes in terms of quality. I have to admit, I could get a coarse flock in order to achieve my light colour. And the main reason why I went down the light colour path was that a light-coloured playing area, being brighter, allowed you to see your elements a bit easier and it felt a bit less depressing, etc. But, while I have to admit it's perfectly acceptable for game, and I did use these a great deal, they do not look very good. And fine turf is the way to go. And unfortunately, if you go down the fine turf path, you need to go to a darker green colour. This change of attitude on my part was initiated by my elements, which also used this coarse light-coloured flock, and quite frankly my figures looked awful. I moved to a medium flock and looked better. Then I moved to a fine turf on my elements, and that looked really good indeed. And then I wanted to make sure that what I'd created for my elements matched my terrain, which I think actually gives you a really nice look and feel. Gives you the bling without going to the enormous amount of diorama effort that you would need to do otherwise. Now that we're moving back to, when I went back to fine turf, I initially used Folge, which has an excellent range of fine turf, but only offers 4 times of green, as you can see here. I really do recommend this fine turf, but the lack of colour range made me look elsewhere. My other issue is I moved to a country where I found it rather difficult to get this range of flock, so I had to abandon it for that reason as well. Woodland has a very good range of fine turf. While I feel the green blend is still too dark, it can be mixed with earth blend to lighten it up, which I don't really do. However, if you want to use high quality fine turf, unless you've got access to good quality German turf or you live in Europe, there's really no alternative to woodlands. After a significant amount of experimentation, I found all you need is a lot of woodland green and earth blend, and a smaller amount of yellow grass and weed colour. This is all you need to create basic terrain, as well as flocking your elements, and as well as giving you slightly different element colours for opposing armies, so you can identify, Romans and barbarians or whatever. If you want to do some fancy stuff with terrain, you could also use soil to indicate broken or rough terrain, but for most of my rules this is not really required. All my flocking is based on a two-tone system, with the blends acting as the base and a small amount of yellow, grass, weeds or soil to give me the second tone, particularly on the elements. I use two blends because I flock my opposing forces slightly differently so I can quickly recognise which side an element is part of. But if the players didn't care about this, then they could easily drop the earth blend if they so wish to, at least for flocking elements. I find for playing areas, there's only two tones you need. You need the green blend and the earth blend, and that's all you need for the playing areas. However, if you don't like the woodlands range, or it's difficult to find and you can't get Fowler as well, there are a number of people who offer a great range of turf, but they're all designed for 15 or 25 mil figures. So I personally feel they're not fine enough for 6 mil, much less 3 mil. I'll continue searching around, but I've spent a lot of effort in this area and I don't expect a better solution to suddenly appear. The other change was a use of a different playing area. Originally, I used to use 30 centimetre square tiles as well as 60 centimetre square tiles. While I still occasionally use these 30 centimetre square tiles, I mainly use 80 by 120 sheets of lightweight insulation board or 60 by 90 centimetre sheets of 3mm MDF boards for my playing areas. The main reason why I flipped over is I didn't like the lines between the cork tiles. However, if you wish to stay with cork tiles because they're easy to store and they're easy to transport, and you want to avoid the annoying line or at least minimize it, then you have to spend a significant amount of time to ensure the edges of each tile is as level as smooth as possible to allow for the closest possible fit. This can improve the issue, but it'll never fully go away no matter how much effort you may wish to put into it. My current solution in order to get this fine edge and to reduce the impact of lines is to bind 6 tiles together using clamps. This can sit squarely on a workbench, as you can see here. If we look closely, we can see why the tiles often do not fit perfectly. There are always bumps all over the place. To smooth down all these bumps, I use a sander with as coarse as possible paper. After the smoothing effort, that is, use a sander on this, we end up with clearer edges. It's still not perfect, and if you want to really do a perfect job, you may be better off clamping only 3 tiles together, but this gives a much better effect than my older tiles regardless. You'll be smoothing the edges down one more time after you flock them. This is to remove any glue and flock which can spill over the edge of the tile. The final result, while not perfect, is acceptable. I've noticed the centre of each tile shows the largest gap. For reasons that I can't really remember so much these days, I typically give all my tile an undercoat using a light colour, low-cost paint before placing the green final coat over it. I think from memory it's to do with the absorption of the paint into the tile. A quick note about the green that you paint on the tile. I originally used a darker green which matched the woodland green fine turf, but I discovered if I use a lighter green, the flock was slightly lighter. As a result, I sometimes use a light green final coat. The only point is you must ensure the tile is fully covered with fine turf, as a missing bit will be very visible. However, I must admit, after struggling with trying to ensure that I cover the tile fully, I've gone back to a nice dark green. It means if I miss a bit, it doesn't stick out so much. The other major change I did with my new playing area using woodland fine turf was to create more than one tone in the playing area. In my old tiles I placed things like farmland on the tile, which made it look a bit better but not by much. My early attempts used both the system of placing the tonal fine turf on first and then placing the base fine turf on top of it, and the system which reversed it. In the end, the mechanism I use is that I glue the entire tile, make sure there's glue everywhere. I put the highlight in there first, shake it around, and then I place the green turf on top and shake it around, and that seems to work quite well. Based on this conclusion of putting the tone on first, this shows a tile which has dark green tone. You can see a spot in the top and bottom, and now it's being covered with earth blend. When I shake this off, the tone will be significantly more visible. This shows the same tile with the loose flock removed. The tone is now, as I predicted, more visible. The spraying of the watered down solution of PVA glue will actually darken this tile up a bit more and make the highlights even more visible. The next issue that I need to deal with was focusing on the tone. How much and how large should my light tone be? This shows an early experiment where I placed different sized tones on the tile, most of which were very small. My conclusion is you only need one tone colour and each patch needs to be reasonably large. In this example, having too many small patches, simply it doesn't look very good. I also determined the contrast cannot be too great. So the small light patches use the lightest woodland flock, and it's not a good effect. These days, the highlight is earth blend with a green blend put on top, and that seems to work very well indeed. When placing your fine turf on the tile, you need a very thin layer of glue. Not too thin, you need to make sure you cover all the patches, but you can't have a really thick layer, otherwise you'll get this weird sort of glossy effect. You also need some sort of device which allows the flock to evenly spread along the tile. I use a number of different methods. This shows one's using a kitchen item. I hope my wife does not watch this video. This shows my two base colours with a final two-tone effect. I'm not happy with the tile on the right and now provide a very light sprinkling of green fine turf before I spray my diluted PVA solution on it, which gives me a slightly superior effect. I also don't have lots of highlights. I just have one big green highlight on the right running right through it, and that tends to also look a lot better. When I first created my initial version of this video, I was primarily using tile. However, since then I've moved to larger 3mm thick MDF sheets, which are typically two 90cm by 120 sheets or a single 180 by 120cm sheet. In the end, I hated the lines you get when you use small tiles. By using larger sheets, I can minimize the number of lines, and I think I get a better effect. Let's go now back to the area terrain piece using my 3mm MDF piece. Now, the edging, I originally used a wood rasp, which anyone can do with a lot of effort and a low cost, but in the end it turned out to be just too much effort. This is an example of a wood rasp. This is not easy, but I have to admit it is cheap. Instead of using a wood rasp, you can also use a drill with a suitable drill bit. I originally used a rather old battery-powered drill and this bit, which works reasonably well. I initially used the battery drill instead of mains power drill because the mains power drill is rather large, fast, and if you slip, the whole area terrain piece is destroyed. This drill with a half-dead battery does the job reasonably well. However, I've decided to abandon this. I've gone back to my powered drill, and I can pump these area terrain pieces out at a rapid rate. I originally held the area terrain with my hand while I was sanding the edges, but this is very tiring. I now clamp it down with this rather inexpensive clamp. I can use this to achieve a sharp edge, which does look good. The sharper the better. It only took me about an hour to create all these area terrain pieces using that mechanism or method. I always spray my area terrain pieces to avoid any warping or lumps or bumps from basically hand brushing the paint onto the area terrain pieces. All my area terrain pieces have a felt base. This shows you why I do it. It's really hard to get them off the playing area. Using felt-based area terrain means the pieces stay firmly where they're placed. You can't easily bump them or move them by accident or by possibly players who are cheating. By using felt bases, you can build up a town in any manner you wish. This shows 2 irregularly shaped towns. I also use resin buildings, which I've shown earlier. These do slide off if bumped, so I also put felt on them as well. The other major change that occurred from the first time I created this video to now is my built-up areas. These days I use 1 in 1000 scale buildings, which I arrange in a manner to allow elements to sit on top of them. My previous built-up areas using balsa wood buildings really didn't look very good, so I abandoned it. And my other 6mm size buildings required me to keep on removing them and putting them back again. This works really well for 6mm figures. So really, in conclusion, figure gaming really is all about the bling, and gamers should consider putting as much effort as possible at creating good-looking terrain while being still easy to transport, deploy and use in a real game. And so we come to an end of episode 19, which covers creating simple area terrain pieces. Alle guten Dingen kommen zu einem Ende.